All right, let's dive into some practical English learning, huh? You know those everyday phrases we hear all the time that aren't really in textbooks?
Oh, yeah.
The stuff that helps us actually, sound natural in real conversations.
Mm.
We're checking out this video, and it's all about how casual dialogues can, boost our confidence when speaking English.
Yeah.
What's your take on this whole idea of everyday English being so important?
Well, what I find really interesting is how the video kind of points out that a lot of us fall into this trap of relying too heavily on textbook English.
Yeah, totally.
Hmm?
Like, you learn all these fancy words and grammar rules, but then you get out into the real world, and it's like a whole different ball game.
It really is. It's like imagine having a toolbox full of all the right tools, but then you don't know how to actually use them, right?
Exactly. You're standing there with a hammer and nails like, okay, now what?
Exactly. Everyday dialogues are where you actually learn to use those tools and build something real.
So true. Textbooks give you the foundation, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
But then, real-life conversations, they throw all these curveballs at you. Slang, idioms, those weird regional accents, everything. It's like, you learn the basic steps of a dance, but then it's all about feeling the music and just going with the flow.
I love that analogy. It's about adapting and improvising.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where these everyday phrases come in. Think about it, like ordering a coffee. I mean, a textbook might tell you to say, "I would like to purchase a cup of coffee, please."
Right. But nobody actually talks like that.
Exactly. In a real coffee shop, you'd probably hear something more like, "Can I get a latte grande with oat milk?"
Yeah, or even just like, latte, please.
Right. It's so much more natural and efficient.
Totally. I remember when I was traveling abroad, I would try to use all those textbook phrases, and I just felt so, I don't know, robotic.
Oh, I bet.
It's those small, informal expressions that make you sound like you actually belong.
Absolutely. It's all about blending in and connecting with people on a more natural level. And, the video does a great job of giving some solid examples of these everyday dialogues, like, the coffee shop scenario we talked about, asking for directions.
Oh, yeah, the directions one was great.
Right. Even something as simple as grocery shopping. These are the kinds of situations we encounter all the time.
Every single day.
So mastering those phrases just makes life so much smoother.
Totally. What I really liked about that asking for directions dialogue was how it skipped all those formal, complicated directions you might find on a map.
Right.
The video just had someone saying something like, "It's just down the street, take a left at the traffic lights." Simple and straight to the point.
Exactly. It sounds way more authentic and natural than proceed north for 200 meters and then make a westward turn.
Uh-huh. Yeah, nobody talks like that. And it's not just about learning these cool phrases. It's about understanding how they're actually used in context.
Absolutely. The video really emphasizes that.
With the right intonation, the rhythm, all that good stuff.
It's all connected, the words, the delivery, the context.
It makes me think, reading those dialogues out loud, like the video suggests, that seems like a decent way to practice.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Getting comfortable with the sounds and the flow.
But wouldn't having a conversation partner be even more helpful? Like to really get that real-time practice,
Oh, absolutely. Reading aloud is a great starting point.
Right.
But having a partner to bounce ideas off of and practice with, that definitely adds a whole other dimension to it.
It's that spontaneity, right? Like you have to think on your feet.
Exactly. You can't just plan out every word you're going to say.
I guess it's kind of like the difference between practicing your tennis serve against a wall and playing an actual match.
Haha, I love that. You've got to get out there and play the game.
Exactly. Speaking of tools and resources, I noticed the video mentioned language learning apps and websites.
Oh, yeah, those can be super helpful.
What do you think about those?
Well, I think they're fantastic for building a solid foundation, especially when you're starting out. They provide a structured environment for focusing on specific vocabulary, grammar points, all that good stuff.
Right. They can break it down for you.
But I think it's important to not rely solely on those tools.
I agree.
The video makes a great point of encouraging you to jump into real conversations as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Get out of your comfort zone.
Exactly. Even if it's just chatting with a cashier about the weather, every little interaction helps.
That's like building those conversational muscles.
Absolutely. You wouldn't try to run a marathon without training.
True that.
So the more you practice those real-life conversations, the more confident and fluent you'll become.
This whole conversation is making me think about the music of English, something the video mentions.
Oh, yeah, the rhythm and flow.
It's not just about saying the right words. It's about how you say them.
Right, exactly. Intonation, pauses, the way your voice rises and falls, it all contributes to meaning.
Like, think about how just changing your tone at the end of a sentence can turn a statement into a question.
Right. It's fascinating how much we convey with our voices.
It's like learning to play a musical instrument. You need to understand the notes, but it's the rhythm, the dynamics, the emotion you put into it that makes the music come alive.
I love that analogy. And mastering those nuances, that's what really makes your English sound natural and engaging.
It's like adding those final touches to a painting that bring the whole piece to life.
Beautifully said. So it's not just about what you say, but how you say it.
And just like with music, I guess finding the right resources to practice with is key. The video mentions a few, like those language apps and websites, but I'm curious, are there any other approaches you find particularly effective for mastering this, like music of everyday English?
That's a great question. I'd say one approach that often gets overlooked is listening to native speakers in authentic contexts, like podcasts, audiobooks, or even just eavesdropping on conversations at a coffee shop.
Oh, like a fly on the wall.
Exactly. It's about immersing yourself in the soundscape of the language. And the key is to really pay attention, not just to the words themselves, but to those pauses, the emphasis, the way speakers use their voices to create meaning.
So it's like training your ear to hear the music of everyday English.
Precisely. And the more you listen, the more you start to internalize those rhythms and patterns, making it easier to reproduce them in your own speech.
Wow, I think we've already covered a ton in this first part of our deep dive. From ditching the textbook dependence to understanding the importance of real-life practice and even the musicality of spoken language.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover about this fascinating world of everyday English.
Definitely. Before we move on, though, we want to make sure you're with us on this journey. What's resonating with you so far in our discussion about mastering those everyday phrases and rhythms? What's got you thinking?
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a flash to dive even deeper into the strategies and tools that can help you unlock the fluency and confidence you're looking for in your everyday English.
We're back and still diving deep into the world of everyday English, moving beyond those textbooks and really embracing the way people actually speak.
Right. And before we jumped off, you brought up a really crucial point about real-world practice.
Oh, yeah. It's not enough to just, understand the ideas, right?
Definitely not. It's like you have to actually use what you learn in real conversations.
Absolutely. It's one thing to recognize a phrase when you hear it, but to actually use it smoothly in conversation, that's a whole other skill.
It really is. Think about it like learning to ride a bike, right? You can read all the books you want about balance and pedaling.
Right.
But until you actually get on that bike and start trying, you won't truly get it.
You're going to wobble, you might even fall a few times, but eventually something clicks.
Exactly. And that's the same with language. You got to get out there and practice.
I love that analogy. It's like building that muscle memory, both physically and mentally.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about everyday English is that there are so many opportunities to practice.
Oh, for sure.
Like every interaction, whether you're ordering a coffee or asking for directions, it's a chance to put your skills to the test.
I mean, the video we're talking about highlights those scenarios too, right?
Exactly. The coffee shop, asking for directions, even just going grocery shopping. It's not just random stuff they picked. It's situations we all find ourselves in all the time.
All the time. So by mastering those specific phrases, you're kind of getting those insider tips.
Right. It's the language that flows naturally, the stuff that native speakers use without even thinking about it.
It's the difference between saying, "Can I grab a latte?" versus "I would like to purchase a latte, please."
Exactly. Which one sounds more like something you'd hear in a real cafe?
Definitely the first one.
It's more casual, more authentic.
And it's not just about the words themselves, right? It's also about how you say them.
Oh, for sure. Intonation, pauses, all those subtle changes in your voice, they can totally change the meaning of what you're saying.
Which brings us back to the musicality of English, right?
Exactly. Mastering those everyday phrases is one thing. But it's also about mastering the rhythm and flow of spoken language. How do you make your English sound natural? Not like you're reading from a textbook.
It's like I was watching this British comedy show the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And I realized, half the jokes were in the delivery.
Really?
Yeah, the timing, the emphasis, the way the actors played with the words. He was amazing.
It's true. Comedy relies so much on those subtle nuances of language.
It was like a masterclass in natural rhythm and intonation.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's not just about understanding the jokes. It's about feeling the rhythm of the language.
Exactly. Speaking of experiencing language, we talked about those language learning apps and websites.
Oh, yeah. Those can be really helpful tools.
But how do we Like bridge that gap between practicing in those kind of structured environments
Yeah.
and having real-world conversations
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like practicing your golf swing at a driving range.
versus actually being out on the course.
Exactly. The conditions are different. The pressure is different.
So how do we, like, make that transition?
Well, one way is to be intentional about seeking out opportunities for interaction.
Oh, okay, so like actively looking for chances to practice.
Exactly. Even if you don't live in an English-speaking country, you can often find like language exchange groups, conversation clubs, or even online communities where you can connect with native speakers.
So even if you're not physically surrounded by the language, you can still create those immersive experiences.
Precisely. And as you get more comfortable, don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
Okay, like what do you mean?
Well, like strike up a conversation with a stranger at a cafe. Or, when you travel, ask locals for recommendations instead of just relying on your phone.
Or even just switch your phone's language settings to English.
Exactly. Little things like that can make a big difference.
It's like leveling up in a video game, right? Each time you push yourself a little further, you unlock new skills and gain more confidence.
Exactly. And you start to internalize those everyday phrases and rhythms so they become a natural part of how you communicate.
It's like you're building this mental library of ready-to-use expressions that you can draw on in different situations.
Precisely. And that's a big part of what makes someone sound natural and fluent.
So it's not just about knowing the words, it's about having them at your fingertips, ready to go.
Exactly. You're not translating in your head or searching for the perfect words. You're just expressing yourself naturally and spontaneously.
It makes me think about how kids learn languages. They don't sit down with textbooks and grammar rules. They just, like, absorb the language through constant exposure and interaction.
That's a great point. We can learn a lot from observing how children approach language.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's all about playfulness, curiosity, and a willingness to experiment without being afraid to make mistakes.
Speaking of mistakes, the video really emphasized that they're an inevitable part of the learning process.
Oh, absolutely. You can't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back.
But I think it goes even deeper than that, right? Like, mistakes aren't just something to be tolerated. They're actually valuable feedback that can help us improve.
That's so true. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn and grow.
Instead of getting discouraged, we can use them as stepping stones on our path to fluency.
Exactly. It's like those aha moments you have when you finally figure something out. The struggle makes the breakthrough even more rewarding.
And that sense of accomplishment, it can really fuel your motivation to keep going.
Absolutely. It keeps you pushing forward, striving for that next level of mastery.
So it's not just about the end goal of fluency. It's about enjoying the journey and embracing all the ups and downs along the way.
Beautifully said. It's about seeing language as this living, breathing thing. Something to be explored and experienced, not just studied and analyzed.
And recognizing that fluency isn't a destination, it's an ongoing process.
Exactly. It's a journey of continuous discovery and growth. And speaking of journeys, I'd love to hear from you. As you think about your own experience with English, what are you finding most challenging? Is it the vocabulary, the grammar, or maybe that elusive rhythm and intonation we talked about? What's got you, scratching your head?
That's a great question to ponder. And while you're thinking about that, we'll be back in a jiffy to explore some specific strategies and resources that can help you overcome those challenges and really unlock your full potential in everyday English. And we're back, wrapping up our deep dive into the world of everyday English. I hope you've all had a chance to think about those aspects of conversational English that might be tripping you up a bit,
Yeah, those little hurdles we all face. It's good to acknowledge them though, right?
Totally, because as we've been saying, it's all part of the learning process.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that everyone has those moments, even native speakers.
Really?
Oh yeah, language is constantly evolving. I mean, there's always something new to learn or some weird slang that pops up.
Oh, totally. I feel like I'm always learning new slang.
Me too. The key is to just stay curious, keep that learning spirit alive.
Love that. So let's talk strategy. What are some things people can actually do to really nail those tricky parts of everyday English?
Okay, well, the video we've been discussing has some good tips, but I think one thing that people often overlook is the power of observation.
Observation, what do you mean?
Well, think about it. We're surrounded by spoken English all the time, right? Movies, TV shows, music, even just conversations happening around us in a cafe or on the bus.
True. But we don't always actively listen to it, do we?
Exactly. It's easy to just passively consume media without really paying attention to how the language is being used. Like, think about looking at a painting. You can glance at it and get a general idea, but if you really want to appreciate it, you have to study the details, right?
Yeah.
The brush strokes, the colors, the composition.
Wow, yeah, that's a good point.
It's the same with language. So one strategy is to become a more active listener. Really pay attention to how native speakers are using those everyday phrases.
Okay, so like be more mindful of how people are speaking, even if it's just a casual conversation.
Exactly. Listen to how they're inflecting their voices, where they pause, how they emphasize certain words.
So it's kind of like turning everyday life into a language learning lab.
Exactly. And you can even make it fun, like try shadowing a native speaker. Pick a short clip from a movie or TV show and try to mimic their pronunciation, their intonation, everything.
Oh, like a voiceover artist?
Yeah, exactly. And don't worry about being perfect. The goal isn't to sound exactly like them. It's more about just developing an awareness of those subtle details that make spoken English sound natural and engaging.
It's like adding those finishing touches to a painting, the little things that really bring it to life. Speaking of bringing things to life, what about like personalizing your learning? I feel like that's super important.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the situations you encounter most often in your daily life. What phrases do you hear people using? What vocabulary would be helpful for you to know?
Right, because we all have different needs and goals, right?
Exactly. So tailor your learning to those specific needs. If you're a student, maybe focus on the language used in academic discussions.
And if you travel a lot, maybe prioritize phrases for navigating airports, restaurants, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about creating your own custom-designed language toolkit. And remember, those tools will probably change over time as your interests and goals evolve.
That's so true. Okay, so tools. We've talked about apps, websites, but what about more immersive experiences? Like you mentioned language exchange groups before, and the video talks about watching movies and TV shows in English.
Oh, yeah, those can be fantastic. But, don't just passively watch. Actively engage with the material. Write down new phrases you hear. Try to use them in conversations. Even create your own little dialogues based on scenes from the show.
Turn it into an active learning experience.
Exactly. And honestly, don't underestimate the power of simply immersing yourself in the sounds of English. Like, listen to podcasts, audiobooks, music, anything that just gets you used to the natural rhythm and flow of the language.
Yeah, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, training your ear.
Exactly. The more you listen, the more those rhythms and patterns become second nature to you. And that's when your own speech will start to sound more natural and fluent.
Love it. Well, I feel like we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. From ditching the textbook to embracing the musicality of language, it's been quite a journey.
It really has. And we've explored so many great strategies for mastering everyday English.
From active listening to creating personalized learning plans, finding ways to really immerse yourself in the language.
And most importantly, remembering to have fun with it.
Right, because at the end of the day, learning a language should be enjoyable.
Absolutely. It's a journey of discovery, not a chore.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring with us. Remember, mastering everyday English takes time and effort, but the rewards are well worth it.
Keep practicing, keep exploring, and most importantly, never lose that curiosity for language.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.